So what am I supposed to do at the end of my podcast episodes? Do I just stop talking? Do I just start playing music? Do I need to say something that's like a call to action? Like, what am I supposed to do whenever I'm done with the podcast episode? That's what we're going to talk about today. So let's get right to it. Hey y'all, Crystal here today, and we're going to talk about your podcast outro. What is this, right? If you've never heard of this, you don't know what I'm talking about. The podcast outro is what happens at the very end of your podcast, like the last minute to 30 seconds, or could just be the last 5 seconds of your show. But I often hear people say, I don't know how to end my podcast. How do I actually get it, like wrap it all up? How do I actually close this thing out? So that's what we're going to talk about today. I'm going to share with you 3 tips for creating your podcast outro, and I'm going to share with you some examples from my own podcast. So let's get right to it. So the first podcast outro I have to share with you today is the recap and wrap it up. What does this mean? It's basically for those of you that have your solo podcast and you're teaching something, and maybe you have 4 main points that you hit on, right? You have 1, 2, 3, and 4. And you're like, okay, I'm going to mention this one here, this one there, this one there, this one there. But maybe people forgot by the time that you're ending your show. So you want to do a recap. And I have a few what I'll call trigger words that let my audience, people that have been listening for a while, know that I'm wrapping things up. Like this is coming to an end. And those are, but that's all I have for you today. Like these are trigger words that I use, or I actually say the words, hey, let me do a quick recap. And what I will say, like here's where the example comes into play. I will say, that's all I have for you today. So let's do a quick recap. I wanted to talk about point number 1, point number 2, point number 3, and point number 4. And this is what you should think about whenever you're done, right? If you want them to have one strategic takeaway, this is where you could put that. Or you could put your call to action, but we're going to talk about that here in a second. But I want you to consider a recap. If you're teaching a whole bunch, like don't teach way too much in one episode. Make sure that you focus on one topic. Actually, go watch this video right here. If you have not watched it, about picking a topic, making sure that you're very focused on your podcast episode whenever you're creating it. But I want you to just do a quick recap. And that is the first tip that I have to share with you today. The second podcast outro example is, I already kind of said it, but we're going to say it again, is your call to action, or CTA. So imagine that you created a podcast episode that was around 30 minutes long. Maybe you have a minute at the beginning for your intro, then you have your podcast theme, and then you deliver your actual podcast topic, which could be up to 25 minutes, and then you're trying to end at the end. Well, what do you want people to do after they listen to it? Do you want them to join your free Facebook group? Do you want them to follow you on Instagram, send you a DM? Do you want them to follow up with you by email? What is it that you want your people to do? You need to have a call to action. And if you want to know more about calls to action, make sure you watch this video right here, because it has a lot of really good examples of what you can say whenever you're wrapping things up in your podcast outro. So that is number 2 for you today for your podcast outro examples. So I want you to tell me in the comments below where you are in your podcast stage. Are you just trying to revamp your podcast outro? Are you just getting started and you're trying to figure out, like you actually haven't launched your show? Tell me in the comments below, because I want to create more content that is related to your outro and your format, but I want to know where you are in your stage. So tell me in the comments below. Okay, let's get back to the last tip I have to share with you about your podcast outro. And the third example that I have to share with you today, all about your podcast outro, is you can share your tagline. Oh, this is my favorite. This is so much fun because it incorporates a lot of my absolute favorite things. Okay, I love podcasts, right? This is my jam. But I also love branding and marketing. And here's where we marry the two together so nicely. Because if you ask someone that's been listening to my podcast, the Proffitt Podcast, you can check it out here and in the video description below, but they will probably be able to tell you verbatim what the tagline is for my podcast, because I have said it every single episode for more than 240 episodes at this point, okay? Like, I have said it every single time, and it is, keep it up. We all have to start somewhere. If you've been watching the YouTube videos here, then you have heard me say this too, because I say it here. It is my tagline. Keep it up. We all have to start somewhere. It is part of my branding, part of my marketing, and it is something that I want people to think about whenever they think about my show, my business, my YouTube channel, and anything related to Proffitt Media, which is my company. So you could do the exact same with your podcast outro. It is how you are kind of getting that subliminal message of getting inside people's head by just saying the tagline for your show at the very end. Now, most people will have pretty short taglines, so you may have a recap, you could have a call to action, and then have your tagline at the very, very end, or you could have it closer to before you actually end the episode. But I highly recommend you have something related to a tagline. So like I said, for the Proffitt Podcast, it's keep it up. We all have to start somewhere. For my daily show, the Poddy Report, I always say keep it fresh, keep it fun, and just keep going. Those are the three things I say every single time I end an episode. And it's important to me that my listeners understand that these are my values, right? You got to keep it up. You got to keep it fresh. You got to keep it fun. And you just got to keep going. This is what my brand is all about. This is what I am all about. And I want my listeners to know. So tell me in the comments, what is your podcast about? Like, for real, tell me the name of your show. Tell me your tagline if you have one. Make sure you listen to this podcast episode right here. I'll have a link in the description, but this is from the Proffitt Podcast where I talked about what a tagline is, why it's important, and why you need one. So make sure you go listen to that when we're done with this video here today, because if you've never thought about how you can brand your show, this is branding, marketing 101. People have to understand what it is that your show is about. What are they going to get listening to your show? Is it going to be inspiration, motivation? Like, what is it? So tell me in the comments below a little bit about your podcast. But that's all I have for you today, talking about podcast outros. I hope that you found this video helpful. Make sure you hit that thumbs up and subscribe below if you have not already. Make sure you check out our free training that is linked in the video description below. You don't want to miss that. It's the 4 insider secrets every podcaster needs to know. Whether you are brand new or you're a seasoned podcaster, every podcaster needs to know these 4 insider secrets. So like I said, make sure and give us a thumbs up, subscribe below if you have not already. Check out these other videos right here, all about podcasting and running your online business. And as always, remember, keep it up. We all have to start somewhere.